going out there and competing. Offense kind of got us a little bit yesterday, and we got them today, and that's what you want in these camp days. We never want it to be one-sided. Offense gets us, first day, we get them second day. I'm pretty sure tomorrow when we do it again, they're going to be fired up to get us back. Right.
Just because something's on the line, how much does it raise the bar, even though you're not on pads, to get out there and compete hard?
Man, through the roof. Because now you get that, that noise talking up a little more in the locker room after practice. And then before practice, too, tomorrow, we get the noise talk a little bit, too. So definitely raise the bar for sure.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Training Camp Central. Phil Perry, Tom Curran. It's brought to you by the Yoker's Company. And day 2 of Patriots Training Camp 2022 featured a flip of the script. The defense got hand over the offense, and the energy level stayed high. Phil Perry, what'd you see?
Well, the energy level stayed high, but it was the defensive guys that were whooping it up play after play after play, especially at the end of practice, the most competitive period of practice. The defense did not allow a completion on 10 straight snaps. Tom, you never see that in training camp, especially when these guys aren't even in pads yet. That should benefit the offense, so it was a great finish for the defense yesterday, or today, I should say. After yesterday was an offense-heavy celebration kind of day.
It was, and they absolutely reveled in every opportunity that they had. Hunter Henry, Devontae Parker at the forefront of every celebration when there was a completion. Today, the defense had its say at the end of practice, but it's very interesting. We have assailed the defense for what it was unable to do against the Buffalo Bills and down the stretch last year when they went 2-4 down the stretch. They have fumigated their linebacker room. They have said goodbye to J.C. Jackson. They said goodbye during the season to Stephon Gilmore. They're not as talented a group. Should we read into today's practice against a pretty stout group of offensive players, in my opinion, and say, wow, these guys are on the right track here?
No, I don't think we should go there yet, but I do think we should look at it and give them their just desserts, Tom, because this is probably the first positive moment that they've had since we saw them in Buffalo and they couldn't get a stop against Josh Allen and co. out there with the Buffalo Bills. So for me, yes, we look at it, we take it for what it is. I think we can look at some of the defensive backs especially and say, tip of the cap to those guys because there have been nothing but questions for the cornerbacks all throughout the offseason, and today, several of them showed out.
Jaylen Mills is a player who probably exceeded expectations. Came over from the Philadelphia Eagles. He was their secondary corner, meaning across from J.C. Jackson, their starter opposite, their shutdown guy. He's going to be a starter this year. What have you seen from some of the newcomer corners and some of the guys they drafted last year, one of whom, a familiar name to Patriots fans, showed up?
Well, what's been interesting to me is Terence Mitchell, who was signed this offseason as a veteran free agent, has been the guy with the first group opposite Jaylen Mills, so that stands out, though he hasn't made any splash plays just yet. Then Malcolm Butler and Jack Jones have been sort of the second group of corners, Tom, and I thought they played really well. They were part of that defensive unit at the end of practice that really made things difficult for the Patriots offense. It wasn't like they were breaking up every pass, although Jaylen Mills had a nice pass breakup on a slant to Nelson Aguilar, but there were multiple plays where Mac Jones just could not get rid of the ball because nobody was open. So I give credit to Jack Jones, Malcolm Butler, Marcus Jones was in coverage on Kendrick Bourne on one play, kind of sailed out of bounds almost off Kendrick Bourne's hands, but in part because of tight coverage from Marcus Jones, the rookie. So again, several of these players stepping up, and Josh Bledsoe, maybe the star of the defense thus far. Second-year player, 4 pass breakups in 2 days is what I have him down for.
The best Bledsoe they've ever seen, ladies and gentlemen, the best Bledsoe they've ever seen. When we look at this group, what should we feel now about the cornerback depth? Because you just reeled off 6 or 7 guys. Again, important to remind everyone that if you're coming to training camp Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and next week going forward into their first preseason game, that's when it gets real. This is still extended minicamp, but it is fairly competitive. So that caveat in mind, are you feeling better about the cornerback depth because of guys like Bledsoe and Mitchell and even Sean Wade, an acquisition from last year?
Well, I'll go to what Jaylen Mills told me today, which was, how confident do you feel in this group? And he said, I feel confident because I know about the work that we've put in, but come back to me at the end of training camp and ask me how I feel. And I think that's how we all should feel. You can look at this group and look at this day and take it for what it is, but we shouldn't be extrapolating over the course of a 17-game season and say, this might be one of the best groups in the NFL, 10 straight incompletions, and they gave up a touchdown on the last play. But to their credit, Tom, I actually like the attitude that we've heard from the defensive backs, because even though Malcolm Butler joked at the end of practice today and said, Oh, it looks like Bill Belichick's an offensive coach now. He made us do push-ups because we lost 1 rep out of 11. But other DBs said, hey, the last play of the game, a lot of times, is the most important play. We didn't get it done on that snap. We need to be 11 for 11 next time. So I give him credit for that attitude.
And the guy who got in on that gotta-have-it play, it was Hunter Henry, the tight end, who actually, coming out of last year, seems to be one of the staple players in the Patriots offense. I spent some time writing about Hunter Henry today, and we're going to move on to that right now. Hunter Henry, I explained in my story on NBCSportsBoston.com, made a leaping, twisting catch over third-year safety Kyle Duggar during the first 7-on-7 session. Later in a gotta-have-it rep with push-ups, riding on the outcome, Henry snuck into the left flat, caught a little red zone flip from Mack Jones, scoring a touchdown and causing a commotion among a Patriots defense that had dominated the previous 10 plays. After both of those catches, Henry led the entire offense in over-the-top celebration that was simultaneously ridiculous and kind of easy to appreciate. Here's Hunter Henry talking about his 2022 camp expectations, and it's brought to you by, it's Adrian Phillips talking about Hannah.
Everything, literally everything. I mean, he's a balanced tight end with like some of the best hands in the NFL. You know, you got a guy that he can make every route look the same. He can switch it up. He can do whatever you want, and that's what makes it a tough cover. He's smooth, and he's a guy that continues to critique his game and just work hard. And that's why it's a battle every time that we're out there, because you know when you line up against him, you know what he's going to bring. So, like I said, I think he's a beast. That's why I call him Beast.
He's a beast. That's why I call him Beast. Those absolutely distracting beehives they're wearing on their heads right now does detract just a little bit from the conversation. But that's Adrian Phillips on Hunter Henry. That's brought to you by Shaw's Perfecting the Art of Fresh. And if you're perfecting the art of catching touchdowns in the red zone, Hunter Henry's a good example. He had 9 touchdowns. He had 9 receptions in the red zone last year. He was a staple of the offense for Mack Jones.
Yeah, and he's one of the league leaders at his position last year in terms of red zone targets. So it just tells you how much Mack Jones trusts this guy. And Tom, it hasn't necessarily been a tight end dominated training camp thus far, and it's only been 2 days. But it's not like every personnel grouping we've seen has been 2 tight ends. We haven't seen neither Hunter Henry nor Jonnu Smith necessarily peppered with targets, but when Henry has been targeted, he's been productive through these 2 days.
Even though we haven't seen him in these first 2 days, we haven't really even seen any running game either because they don't have pads on yet. But even though that's the case, do you expect a Smith-Hunter Henry development where they're much more involved in this offense? They have to be. I mean, between them, they have a $37 million contract and I believe a $51 million contract.
You have to figure out a way to get both of these guys involved. And we know Hunter Henry, again, he'll be involved as he was last year. But it's really, how do you incorporate Jonnu Smith? How do you figure out how to use these guys together? And also use all that depth that it looks like you have right now at receiver. We talked a lot about the defense and the success they had today, but the receivers were hot early in practice. Mack Jones completed his first 12 attempts in 7-on-7, and then his first 5 in 11-on-11. So there was a period of practice, the first half of practice, where the ball basically did not hit the ground. They have their fair share of weapons offensively.
Second day impressions on Mack Jones. I thought, again, he's everything you want to see. And even when he does have a stretch, and he was a part of it, that 0 for 10 stretch where the defense turned it up, he wasn't horrendous. You weren't seeing balls in the ground. You weren't seeing horrendous overthrows. There was cause, it was the defense, for the problems.
Yeah, I thought one was a throwaway because, again, everybody was covered. One glanced off of Kendrick Bourne's fingers that probably he would say should have been a touchdown. Another, Nelson Aguilar, might have even been able to drag his feet, Tom, in the end zone, but he just kind of continued his route out of bounds and caught the ball. So even though they got cold towards the end, I really didn't look at Mack Jones and say, man, he's screwing this up for them.
Yeah, it was an interesting practice, to say the least. Tomorrow will again be interesting because, as Jaylen Mills said, they're now 1-1 offense and defense against each other and having the upper hand.